Well, good afternoon or morning, depending on where you're located at in the US. We appreciate you all joining us today. Um, uh, Once again, this is our state retail program manager, approximately quarterly call, though we do try to avoid the summer months because we know that there's lots going on in the summer months, and that's also when many of you get to take vacations and those sorts of things. So we tend to not. This is our last one until we come back in September, correct, Deanna?
That's correct. Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the next slide and start kind of through our content here. So first, just a reminder in case you haven't noticed, the conference is coming right up June 21 through 25th in Dallas. Thus, my background of the Texas Longhorn, which you do actually find in some of the cities in Texas, like Fort Worth, definitely has some right in the stockyards, along with others. But a great place to go. The conference is shaping up very nicely. I'm sure no shock to anyone here. Attendance will be a little bit smaller, but not dramatically smaller. So we do encourage you, if you haven't registered yet, to go ahead and get registered. Also on Sunday, we will do another program manager session for program leaders for the state programs. Thank you. If you haven't registered for the session, please go ahead and get registered if you plan on attending. We definitely want to include you. We're still shaping up the agenda, but I suspect you will see some things similar to last year. Uh, a policy update, some discussions, also coming forward on some other areas. And probably that'll probably be the only opportunity you get to see some of the FDA folks is during that session, as there will be very, very few FDA folks participating in the conference. One note is there's going to be a pre-session on sorry, and I'm going to have to look at the date. We didn't do a slide for it, on the afternoon of June 17th, which will include many of our federal partners. So the session with the Deputy Commissioner from FDA, leaders from FSIS and CDC, along with a second session with the folks from the Office of Partnerships, and also some OTED also, it appears, will be. So that'll be on the afternoon of June 17th. The announcement for that will come out, I think, tomorrow. So you'll be seeing that. But just heads up, we're going to do that rather than doing those during the conference sessions. Once again, the QR code's right here. If you haven't registered for the program manager meeting you intend to attend, we're also watching the list pretty closely. And if we see some folks that we think should be there, we're reminding you to register. So heads up on that. Okay, well, we skipped a slide there, Deanna. We were going to talk about the actual program, correct? And
Yes.
which is Deanna. So going to talk a little bit about the retail track.
Yes. And just one thing to note on that retail program manager meeting, you don't have to attend the conference to be able to attend that retail manager meeting, because we would really love to have all of you there and participate with that. But as part of our retail track, we have a super exciting foodborne illness outbreaks session with Frank Yanis. We're going to have a great communications panel with regulatory and industry up there talking together. We have our special processes speed dating, which is going to be super fun. Plus lots of other interactive sessions, and the pest control one. I know that's not a super exciting topic, but we do have some really awesome speakers. So it is going to be an exciting talk on pest control. So we do hope to see you there.
I would also just note the general session. We're very lucky. Frank Yanis is going to do a 2-hour food safety culture for regulators session with us, along with very excited to have Jason Evans back to talk a little bit about how do we build relationships in a virtual world. But a great set of speakers for the general session also. So let's move on a little bit past conference to some other things coming up. Several training opportunities are coming up. So basic inspections and investigations for new manufactured food and retail regulators. We have a Train the Trainer coming up, which is an in-person course, July 15th through the 18th in Ohio. And thank you very much, the Ohio Department of Agriculture, for hosting that. But that is coming right up. So if you're interested in that, now is the time to definitely get registered for that. And the link is on the bottom of the slide. Let's move on. A couple other things coming up. First part of the year, first part of the new fiscal year, root cause analysis for retail food safety at the end of September. Evaluating active managerial control for regulators. both virtual courses. Those will be that one will be at the end of July. And then Inspector Boot Camp, Advanced and Basic Inspector Boot Camp, both in January of 2026. This has been a very popular event, but we're looking forward to it. For those of you that aren't familiar, Inspector Boot Camp tends to be for beginning newer inspectors. Advanced Inspector Boot Camp for those a little more seasons and then have attended the first version. Inspector Boot Camp tends to be pretty standard sort of items that don't vary a lot between the years. Advanced Inspector Boot Camp is essentially every year tends to have some new topics. So we're pretty excited about that. Typically, we have nearly 1,000 participants on many of those sessions. So it's a very popular item. And of course, we do get NEHA continuing ed hours available for that. So for those of you that need that for your staff, I will say we are working very hard to ensure that we have California continuing ed hours available for that, for those that are in California by the time we get to 2026, and along with that on several of our other programs. So something that we're working on adding based on some feedback from California state and local participants. So let's move on. The program manager workshop series for the new program managers will be coming up again in 26, beginning in January, with virtual sessions in January, March, and May, and a 1 hour in-person during the annual educational conference, which in 26 will be in Columbus, Ohio. Excited to go to Columbus. For those of you that haven't been recently, it's an absolutely wonderful city. And I think our folks will really enjoy it there. But exciting, definitely an exciting option. So this we really recommend for new program managers, new program leaders. So if you're interested, there will be a call going out for those folks in early July, again in September and October. Get signed up soon. There is a seat limit on that. So if you have someone that might be interested, if you just email Deanna, we'll get it over to the right folks and get you on that, or get you or your staff person on that list. Once again, designed for new and existing program leaders, lots of those topics that you may not come into the position with. So things like budgeting, HR, working with federal grants, all of those sorts of topics that you don't always do. And you can see the list off to the side, but definitely a great opportunity. And I will say, as someone that went into that role, there were definitely some things I wish I had some additional opportunities to be trained on before or early on in my career in those areas. So definitely a good thing. Moving on. Oh, and no cost for that program, with the exception of, well, no cost for that program, sorry. Moving on to the next slide. Environmental sampling is also something for retail outbreaks. Is something that's always available. If anyone's interested, just let us know. We are working on scheduling a handful of sessions across the country right now that will be offered in 25, the fall of 25 and spring of 26. But if someone would like to get one of those now, or would like to have one specifically for your region, let us know that. We always appreciate the opportunity to take it to places that want it. So just let us know. Moving on. And of course, the credential series, which is yet another opportunity for those that are interested based on the national curriculum standards and the competencies within those standards, follows with essentially the program that we're moving toward and that the CFP just actually moved toward as it relates to training, but follows that process exactly based on those competencies. So it's something to take a look at as perhaps another way of evaluating the competency of your staff. Moving on. And we're really excited. Sorry, Deanna, I'll let you talk about this.
Oh, thank you. So for those of you that have taken advantage of our freebie exercises to test your foodborne illness outbreak response readiness procedures, we're adding a second one, another one that is just retail centric. So you can find the first one that we posted last year on the APTO website. And now we are in the process of adding a second one that deals with mobile units and multi-jurisdictional issues when it comes to a foodborne illness outbreak response. So we think that's going to be a great benefit for you, especially if y'all are working towards standard 5 and you need to have a mock outbreak inspection exercise completed annually. We're trying to get some more options out there available for you. So if you don't see it on the APTO website, just reach out to me and I'll make sure you have that link in your inbox.
One other thing to mention, we're excited that later in the fall, we'll be also releasing a food fraud exercise based upon an exercise largely developed by the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. Very excited to bring that forward, knowing that that's something that many of you work with on a routine and regular basis. So another opportunity will be coming in the fall for an additional exercise. There we go. Thank you for doing that, Sally. Okay,
Thank
moving
you,
on.
Sally. Yes, thank you.
Okay, once again, lots of resources on the on afto.org, which are routinely curated. In other words, we make sure the links are current. We add new content every week. So definitely take a look at those. The last slide that I think I'm going to talk about is related to, we have been tracking legislation very carefully from the state and local, from the state legislatures. Many of the legislatures are getting ready to go home. Some are not, but we do track that legislation by in a topical and essentially, sort it by topics so that if you're ever interested in what's happening, you can take a look at what other states have been working on similar legislation to what you might be seeing in your home state. We'll be doing this little bit of a summary of what we saw there so far this legislative session at conference with that state program managers meeting. But I will say it was a pretty active food year this year. Lots happening. I know Texas is still considering a couple bills related to on the chemical side right now, but very, very active food year and lots happening in that space. We'll know a little bit more about what's passed and getting signed by governors as we get closer to the conference states. So I think that is the end. Oh, Deanna, do you want to do this one?
I'll take care of the rest if you like.
Great.
Just a quick reminder, we have a team at APTO that is working to post the fabulous multilingual resources that y'all have created across the country that other folks may be in need of a specific language translated food safety materials. And they don't have the resources in your own agency to do that. So we are compiling all those. We are up to over 58 languages right now. So if you come across something you need a translated educational handout in, please take a look at our website. We are compiling all that information so that you have it available to use. And if there's ever a language that you're looking for that you don't see up there, reach out and we will put it on the list to find a resources for. All right. Last but not least, we love your feedback on these calls. I want to make sure that they are geared to what you want to hear and what is useful and timely for you and your programs. And the only way I'm going to know that is if you do our quick evaluation at the end of the call and let us know what you think. It is only like 5 questions. It's super, super short, but the most valuable piece for me is to know what is of interest to you to hear about on future calls. So if you could do me a favor and fill that out, we will also send the link out after the calls today. So with the call recording, in case you need that to share with anyone else in your agency. And with that, we are going to move on into our main presentation today. And today's call is going to be a little different. When we started having these calls a few years ago, we really wanted to see them become like a network and this interactive discussion time for you all to talk about the things that are important to you, but also to hear how you feel about these different topics and hear what your colleagues are doing in certain situations. So we hope this will be a more interactive and conversational call today as we talk about the trends that we're seeing in state retail food programs. So I know those of you that participated in our program manager state survey a couple of years back at the end of 2023, you had some time with me to go through a bunch of survey questions, and we wanted to make sure and touch on some of the more interesting things that we were seeing as a result of those calls. Some of you have had a first look at this data. We gave a very high-level overview at the AEC last year, but we've had some more time, and we'll admit there were a few challenges along the way, but we have dove deeper into what this data is telling us, and we really wanted to share that with you guys because we have also translated these survey results into some gorgeous infographics that compare a lot of information with where we were in 2021 and where we were in 2023. So if you haven't guessed it, we're going to be doing these every other year, which means we're also gearing up for our third round of this survey later on this year. So we'd really love to hear from you as well on topics that are of interest, things that we can do to make the data collection more meaningful and impactful, since we are ramping that up for later on this year. So co-presenting with me today, we have Carrie Rigdon. Carrie, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, thanks, Deanna. Hey, everybody. I'm Carrie Rigdon. I am the research director here at AFDO. So I help Deanna and others on doing the analysis for the surveys and other kind of data intensive analysis. And I'm really excited about hearing your thoughts on what we've learned from the past two interview-based surveys. Thanks, Deanna.
Sure, thanks, Carrie. And next up, presenting with me as well, is Miss Sally Flowers. Sally, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Deanna. So I'm Scientific Affairs Director with AFDO, and to echo what Carrie was saying, I also assist with data analysis for this survey and with helping to build the next one coming up.
Right, thank you both. As we go through this information, if there's anything that you would like more information on, or you have a question about, please just raise your hand or put it in the chat, because we really want this call to be more interactive. And I know your colleagues are going to be having some of the same questions that you do. So make sure you let us know and we'll stop and talk about that. All right, so first up, we took a long time to collect this data. We actually started back in April, and we wrapped it up with 61 interviews early in 2024. We had a few outliers where their agencies weren't always willing to give us the approval to have these conversations, which we all understand those restrictions from our higher ups, especially when this is a new process for them. But we're still grateful for the time and the information that we were able to glean through those interviews. So we actually collected data from 63 agencies, and 61 of those were done by an interview style survey. The other two were only able to fill out the survey in writing, but we still collected that same information and compiled it with the rest for the trend analysis. I'm sure this is no surprise to you, but 24% of you do not conduct retail food inspections, even though you are overseeing the retail food programs within your state. And the other 76%, yes, you do conduct retail inspections in some form. And what do you inspect? Well, that's over there on the other side of the screen. There are restaurants and food service, grocery and retail, convenience stores, and then the others. And you might be wondering why other is such a large number. Well, that's because there is just seems like an unlimited number of retail food establishment types now. Other types of facilities include breweries or retail marijuana or vending or bakeries, meat markets, lodging, hotel, farmers markets, produce stands. Some people inspect cottage food. We also have institutions such as hospitals, daycares, school facilities that fall into that category. And then we can't leave out the mobile units and the temporary events, which a lot of you have a very active role in as well. So lots of different types on our plates to inspect. Any questions about this so far? I see Jessica thought I was going to leave out mobile food, and absolutely not. That is something we all deal with quite frequently. So thanks for adding that in. And next up, we're going to have Carrie talk about food code.
Yeah, thanks, Deanna. So the next few slides talk about the food code in each of your states and state agencies. This is one area where, as we're preparing for the third survey at the end of the year, that we think, well, maybe this is not as dynamic as some of the other aspects of your program. So be thinking about how we might want to approach this to make the interview process a little more efficient. We may just ask about you know talk talk about your response from 2023 and ask if anything's changed. But we'd like to get your thoughts on that. But first, let's look at the data. So next slide, please. So here we have the current food code adoptions and plans for adoption. Let's start with the current food code. So back in 2023, most of you were under the 2017 or the 2013 food code version. You'll see that on the left, and on the right, we are kind of comparing that to the first survey back in 2021. And you'll see the biggest shift was in more adoption of that 2017 food code. And remember that back in 2023, the 2022 food code was still a little new. So that's where everyone was at back in 2023. And next slide, please. And when we asked about, so who has, do you have plans to update your version? And we see that again, the 2022 was fairly new, but we had several states that had planned to update to 2022. And we also had a number of states that said they had no plans. Now, for those who plan to update back in 2023, you can see on the right a really kind of a variety of current plans. So we had 27% who were in 2013, 16% who were in 2017, et cetera. And I'm curious, since we had so many who had said back in 2023 that they had plans to update to 2022, are there any on the call that actually have updated the 2022 version since we talked to you a couple years ago? Any show of hands or put it in the chat? I'm kind of curious if that's if those changes had been made. Okay, Jessica, working on it. All right. Rochelle, so do you mind coming off mute and saying what your thoughts on the plans for adoption?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Rochelle Bland. I'm a food safety manager with the Virginia Department of Agriculture. We started our process, I feel like around 2 years ago, to get the changes incorporated from the 2022 food code, and those were finally effective for Virginia February of this year. So we were very grateful to be able to get through that process and have the changes approved.
Great. And so, Rochelle, just a follow-up question. So how long did you say you were working on from like when you planned it to when to the January when you got the change? Do you have an
About 2
estimate of how
years.
long that took? About a year?
About 2 years, probably
2
like
years.
a year and a half to 2 years, because we don't adopt it by reference, so we have to, translate it to our state code and get the sections that are applicable to Virginia only. We also collaborate with the Virginia Department of Health, since we are a dual agency state, so we try to kind of do them at the same time and check with each other on the changes we are adopting and are not. So it does take a while. And actually that a year and a half to 2 year timeline is the quote unquote fast track option that we have in our state to do legislative changes. So
Wow. Yeah, and we'll see in some of the upcoming slides some of the challenges. But yes, that timing of the legislative session is definitely one of the challenges. I'm seeing a lot of, so yeah, I'm seeing some got some updated. Great. Yeah, okay. And looking at updating to the 2027. Yeah, Troy, please go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed in the chat that Matt from Connecticut had noted that they were going an incorporation by reference, and then the supplements. Not to call you out, Matt. I'm curious what the supplements are. You saying the annex might have, or what? Can you expand on that?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so the language in our general statutes for adoption of the food code references the current version of the food code and supplements published in the off 2 years. So every time one of those comes out, if those changes go through, that goes right into effect, which is a little bit of a challenge with getting that training out to all of our inspectors. But it took us about 8 to 10 years to adopt the food code, as we had a very older version prior to this. So we are trying not to fall back into that trap where we could never get it updated because of legislative challenges. So if anyone ever wants to talk more about that, feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat and we can talk about that further.
No, that's perfect. I had stuck in my brain annexes, and I thought, oh my gosh, they adopted the annex into code. But no supplements. That totally makes sense. Yep. Nope. Thanks for clarifying that.
No problem.
Great question, and thanks for the update on that. Oh yeah, and thanks for the email. Really appreciate you sharing your experiences. Next slide. So we, as Rochelle had mentioned, there are a lot of barriers and challenges. Now, this is one of those questions that was, I believe, open-ended, and then we categorized it. So what we see here, the top one is cumbersome legislative process, but also, the political climate leading towards deregulation was a barrier to several of you, and getting that buy-in from state partners, and also, Rochelle had mentioned that it's both your Department of Ag and Department of Health, and so having that alignment and then training is a challenge. I'm kind of curious, it's been a few years. Do these challenges still ring true? Are you seeing different challenges now? Anybody who's willing to chat or speak to that? Yeah, go ahead, Matthew.
I will say this past legislative year, we had some attempts by legislators to repeal adoption of the food code by reference with no plans to replace it with anything, which would have been a massive deregulation across our state. That was not even, it was introduced, but there was no forward movement on that. And our state reps were able to highlight an outbreak as a reason why that should not be the case. But I imagine we will repeat those challenges. I don't think they're going away. There's always that push to deregulate. So I think that will continue.
Yeah, so it sounds like it did not move forward because of other legislators who had said, we've got concerns about outbreaks, but you all were not called to testify. Is that correct? Or maybe you were preparing
Our
to.
commissioner was very involved with it and was
Oh,
prepared
good.
for that. And our I believe it was our deputy commissioner, spoke at something. It also was interesting because I believe a person proposing it may have had business in the restaurant industry, so there was a little bit of a question on the look of that.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's great.
Certainly.
Oh yeah, Jamie, please go ahead.
Hi, Jamie Higley, Ohio Department of Health. This would fall under deregulation mindset, but in the past few years, there's been a few state laws passed in Ohio. One was for and not just for the food code, but any state rules in Ohio. If an agency adopted a new rule, we had to eliminate two. Yeah, so it was very challenging for our agency. Our legal department handled that. So we basically had to keep track of how many rules we were adding and how many we were removing. And so we worked with our legal counsel on that. And then there was another law passed where there was 6 restricted words that we were not allowed to use. So we had to either remove them or replace them, which and these words included shall, must, shall not, may not. I forget what the 6th one was, require or something like that. And so, so we had to go through the food code. We had to sit down with our Department of Agriculture and go through the food code and change or remove every one of those words. And
No.
the word shall was used like 270 times or something like that. So so that was quite challenging as well. But we got it done.
Yeah. So Jamie, just a follow-up question on that I'm curious, because those are all imperative words, right?
Mhm.
And
Yep.
that's what we regulators rely on. So were you able to also put another imperative word in there, or is it now more kind of squishy voluntary language?
Yeah, so we worked with our legal counsel and we came up with words that we were able to use that they say have the same effect.
Okay.
So so for example, we used the word instead of shall, we used will, or we used is to or are to,
Okay.
um, and things like that, or is obligated to. So like I said,
Good.
it was pretty challenging to try to come up with some words that had the same effect, but were still allowable under this new law.
Wow. Well, that's a huge lift. So kudos to
So
you and your team for getting that done. Thank you
yeah,
for
we
sharing
did,
that.
and so we are now on the 22 FDA food code as of September 2024. So
Congratulations. That's great.
thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Um, and I'll just finish up the food code section with the next slide.
We had one question in the
Oh, yeah.
chat from Stacy, who was wondering, have any other states seen similar laws to what Jamie was describing?
Yeah, thanks, Deanna. Anybody else seen something similar?
I can't remember if I remember seeing something about it here in Connecticut or if I'm confusing it with something that was on the news at the federal level, but I do remember seeing something, but for life of me can't remember if it was a federal thing or if it was a state thing.
Got it. Yeah, and Steve looks like he's kind of backed that up, Matthew, by saying that there's some federal government movement, it looks like, as well. Oh, and Amber, Kansas, we don't have similar laws, but we did have to replace shall on the CFP manager. But oh, we're not able to use another directive word. Okay. So that's something, yeah. So follow up, Amber. Did you have to replace it with some sort of like kind of voluntary word? What did you replace it with? Do you remember? Okay, May. Okay, yes. So that then kind of takes the enforcement teeth out of that, doesn't it? So wow, that is that's new to me. So yeah, it sure does. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. Wow. Um, so okay. Shane says we must re-adopt all rules every 10 years that are deemed with public interest necessary. Or they must be repealed. So, Shane, that's also a heavy lift to be looking at, because certain things change in food safety, but a lot of the basics don't. And so the fact that you have to look at that every 10 years.
Yeah, they changed our process. We used to be able to leave a certain percentage in without having to go through the full readoption process, which means we have to go through two rules review commissions, the Public Health Commission, and then also the designated legislature rules review commission. Now that's not the case. Every rule must go through that commission process.
Wow. And Shane, remind me what state you're from, you're with?
North Carolina,
Oh, okay. Wow.
and we have that zero additional resources to do this with.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, a lot of challenges out there. Yeah, thank you for all for chiming in on that. Just the last bit of data on the food code. Not surprisingly, majority of states in which there is a new food code, the locals also adopt. Some of the locals you had said can be more strict, but you know, a majority adopt. In fact, if you take out the not applicable here, it's about I think 80 or 85%. So yeah, any other comments on the food code before we move on to training? I like the upside down emoji smiling face. Yes, exactly. Things seem a little sideways recently, don't they? So, well, thank you all for sharing, and I'll hand it over to Sally. Talk about training.
Thank you, Carrie. And just briefly, I'm going to turn my camera back off. I had a little bit of Zoom lag earlier. Okay, so looking at training, overall, the 2023 survey looked a little bit more deeply into the training program requirements for retail inspectors than the 2021 survey did. And so the first question we're going to cover was a written training plan for retail food inspectors, something that you guys did in addition to standard 2. And so this was a new question. This was not in survey from 2021. And so big picture, we see that in orange, over half of our programs said no to this, and 1/3 are saying yes to this. And since these are fairly straightforward data, I do want to focus a little bit more on that golden yellowish slice of unsure at 5%. And so this started off being the other please specify category. And as we look through that data more and more, we decided to rename it as unsure. It just was a better descriptor overall versus the catch-all of other. And so to give you some insight of what these 5 responses look like, one person said the plan mirrors FDA standard 2 and does not exceed it. We had one say the individual training plan is for 2 years and it covers coursework only. And the last 3 that we had were kind of more about being unsure. So one respondent said that they have 1 week training that covers epidemiology 101, communications, HACCP, and risk-based inspection. And these are divided into 3 chunks. Another person who said unsure is that they have no training plan to compare. There are 22 staff on their quality assurance and training team, including supervisors and managers. Further, they do have a low risk training plan, and at that time, no work was being done on standard 2. And then the last respondent there says whatever is in place from their prior training structure, they were lacking SOP training guides in 2023. On to the next slide, we do specify get into specifics, looking at whether or not it's required for their staff to take risk-based inspection FD 218. And so looking at the survey from 2023, if we look at 2021, actually the biggest sort of numerical difference, like a flip-flop between yeses and nos, occurred with this particular question. So for instance, the big orange slice where it says 73% says no, FD 218 is not required. That was more like 18% 2 years ago. On the other slice, the blue one, where we have 14% saying yes, required. In comparison to 2021, it was more like 82%, where you had people responding yes, required for all staff, or yes, required for some of their staff. The green slice, where it's up to local health departments, this was a theme that we pulled out of the others category, and so we made that into its own here on the pie chart. The remaining others are in the text box on that bottom right of your slide. And so basically you've got where existing staff have taken it, although it's not required. However, new staff do need to take FD 218. Another one mentioned FD 218 is a goal, not required, and there is no due date. And then finally, FD 218 is on their training plan, and the challenge is that registration fills up quickly for them. And so we're going to segue now into inspection staff and hiring. And so briefly, when we did this survey in 2023, we introduced questions about minimum employment requirements for retail food, so specifically education, experience, credentials, and then we had an others category. And so on the next slide, we're looking at two of the questions here summarized on this slide. And so on the experience end of it on the left here, experience was still identified as being important in 2023. And when we look at just experience by itself, 24% mentioned that they look for a combination of experience and education when hiring new staff. Just next to it with that, the puzzle pieces and the mind icon, what we did there is we combined the responses where one person said that they have no minimum amount of experience required to 6 people who said that they have a preference for experience, and that's how we arrived at 11% for that figure. 10% of our programs are looking at previous experience in their candidates in food safety, industry, agriculture, and also that relevant education from school could count as experience. In that second row, you see about 6% looking at a combination of 2 years of experience before they sit down for their credentialing exam. And then a handful are looking at previous inspection, regulatory, and compliance experience. And then finally, public health and environmental health experience at 3%. So if we look at the right-handed side, this was very much an open-ended question, and we sorted through the answers and found the following. So this is without any prompting from the survey itself. We had program managers pointing to power skills. So they look for communication, social skills, assertiveness, and what was called hiring for attitude, which is sort of trainability. So having the quality of being trainable as essential to being successful. And the others you see in the bottom there, we had 3 programs offer up that inspectors do get a bump in pay when they earn their credentials. And a few of these do appear to be relevant to specific state requirements, such as being a registered sanitarian, having state residency, and so forth. All right, and then the next slide about hiring goes into education and credentials. And in the top half, overwhelmingly, our programs in 2023 have that education attainment is the main qualifier for employment. At the time of this survey, almost 80% said that they required a 4-year degree. And that 21% wedge, we then exploded into that blue rectangle there. And so we looked for themes and came across, instead of being required, 4-year degrees were preferred among 7 of the respondents. Another 7 said that their minimum is a high school diploma or GED. And then a few more were saying some college 2 years degree of experience. And then one person did say 6 years of combined college and experience, followed by 7 that had no requirements to list there. In the bottom half of the screen, we talk about credentials. So what are the minimum credentials for your new hires? What I want to point out before going over these data is that this survey opened in 2023, like Deanna mentioned earlier, for data collection. And just a few weeks later, AFTO launched their food safety regulatory professional credential series. So we weren't able to include the AFTO credential series on this particular survey, although there was mention of a few AFTO things in some of the open text. So when we asked the question, what are your credential minimum requirements? 46%, so 29 programs in that blue bar have no requirement. The next most popular question is that state credentials were required. And just to add a little bit more to that, along with the RS and REHS, there's also reciprocity with NEHA or other state credentialing programs. Next up in the gray column, 20% of state programs have a NEHA REHS as a requirement. And then we have fewer numbers for CFPM, for the Certified Professional Food Safety at 3%, and then one answer each for Certified Food Inspector and Food Handling certification. So having gone over those education, experience, and other requirements that are for hiring, we are going to be using these data to help build out additional questions in Survey 3.0, talking about the knowledge and skills and experience and power skills. And that will help us to help identify the latest in hiring practices and if there are trends that we can point to. So considering what we've shown you on this slide and the previous one, the question I want to ask you all is, how have you seen these change recently? Do these data still hold up today? Do we see some trends appearing that might differ from what are on the slides here? Another question to ask is, are we tapping into applicant pools where traditionally we haven't recruited in the past? Maybe we are tapping into pools that are maybe not food safety background related. Okay, I see Kim in Alaska, we're seeing a shift towards competency-based hiring. We're seeing that across other programs too, Kim. And as far as power skills and other skills go, what skills are new hires bringing to the table? And maybe are there skills that are standing out as being in need or needing to be developed? Okay, and feel free to raise hands too. Yeah, I see Emily has her hand up. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I think that we are seeing a lot of folks recently that have a hard time with autonomy. We here in Michigan, everyone, works remotely, they work from home, and we have an excellent training program where we can train them how to conduct the inspections. But when it comes time to, push them out on their own, I think that we're seeing more and more people that are struggling with um, planning their days and what to do next and prioritizing work and not being fed their work the way that they were during training, basically. And so that's something. And then I also talked about in the chat there that we've really been working on finding people with those skills like salesmanship and emotional intelligence and great communicators, and focusing less and less on their educational background, because I feel like we can teach them the food code, but it's hard to teach someone to be a great communicator.
Thank you. And I wrote some notes down when you went through that, Emily. I appreciate that. Jessica, I see that had your hand up, and then we'll go look at the chat too. So go ahead, Jessica.
So the state of Mass, we actually have a training program now where me and my boss, Mark, we are the head retail people. We have 10 training hubs throughout the state. And then those hub trainers will train the local Board of Health inspectors. So we'll finally get into a place where we're going to have cohesive training throughout the state. It's going to take a few years, but at least we can now get resources out to them and educate them in the right way for space inspections and things like that. So that's what currently what we're doing in the state of Massachusetts. And my background, I've been in food safety since 2010, and I have a culinary arts background. I also feel, in my opinion, as someone who came from industry and have been in regulatory right now, that you need kind of like a food background in education as well, because you're not understanding the products that they're making and you're writing up people for certain things that is incorrect. So that's just my opinion as someone who comes from a different background. I didn't go to college for this, but I've been a local Board of Health inspector, state inspector, and I did FDA credential work. So you definitely need a regulatory background, but you also need to know about your food products. And YouTube's excellent also in learning that.
Fantastic. And Jessica, if I could just ask a quick follow-up. So with your culinary background, what other kinds of backgrounds are you seeing pop up in your maybe your candidate pools or who you're hiring these days?
So I'm not hiring. I mean, the state of Matt that I know of, I got hired as a state inspector just with my background knowing what I did. And I did, I worked for Duncan Corporate. So we did like manufacturing inspections and things like that. So that helped me get the job. But also working in local board of health and understanding how that works up to the state. So I can't answer that question for the state of Mass, unfortunately.
That's okay. And thank you for what you added about having experience with the local board of health. Emily, I'll call back on you.
That was an accident. I think
Oh.
my hand was still up.
If we had a nickel for every time, no worries. Thank
Right?
you. And I do want to catch up on chat. And thanks for being so chatty. Let me take a look at that. Let's see. We've reformatted interview questions from Emily. Yep. Yep. Yes, we need salespeople with biology degrees and a couple of cross reactions with that. And Matthew says pressure to relax bachelor's requirements. And we have a holdout. Sammy in Washington, new state law requires state hire requirements to allow experience year for year. Okay, yep. And Sammy, I'll say that some of the open text questions line up very well with what you said there in chat as we look through that survey raw data. Having a tough time with autonomy with new hires. Ooh, great computer skills. Yes, I'm writing that one down. Okay. Also from Alaska, new hires need for confrontation, how to deal with conflict management, discretion with regulatory, technical knowledge. Soft skills are queen. And Matt Walker, would you mind unmuting and maybe adding what kind of soft skills do you consider queen?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to managing expectations for operators. Having people who can go in and be like, here's what the code requires, how do we get you to that point, and being able to do those kinds of negotiations and be flexible on timelines and those kinds of things. So it really is kind of that just people skills, being charismatic and kind and patient, but also being able to explain the public health rationale for why the rule is the way the rule is. That's kind of where we like to see people get as inspectors.
Yes, that communication is so key. Thanks for sharing those.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Amber, same question. Do you have anything to add to the list that Matt walked us through?
Are you talking to me?
We're just talking through soft skills and how they're chief these days. And I was just kind of open asking what kinds of soft skills are you all looking at critically when you're hiring?
Okay, so we have a behavioral based interview that we use, and so we try to touch point on that. We actually added a question here recently because we're having trouble with our organizing and having some of that independence. It's not necessarily related to soft skills, but like for soft skills, we do have questions regarding like you have a difficult operator and kind of like how have you handled difficult situations in the past and conflict. We do that. And then, like I said, we added another question recently talking on the other point that we talked about that I put in the chat for like autonomy. Um, like, okay, so how do you fill out your week and how do you schedule and how do what tools do you use to update your calendars and like things like that? Because we're, I guess, having trouble in that sort of area, figuring out how to get somebody one that's trained in food and knows what they're doing there and can educate our operators, but also deal with difficult situations like getting locked in freezers and also do it independently without not indicating on their calendar what they're doing. So it's kind of a hard thing there.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I jotted several things down there, and across the board, including what you were saying, Amber and Matt. Yeah, seeing some themes emerge from the chat also. I know that we do have more slides to continue with too. So what I'm going to do is summarize what I see in chat. So thanks to Kim, Jessica, Troy, Gwen, and others who have contributed to chat. And if you think of other things that would be helpful to be measured with this next survey, yeah, please feel free to add those to chat or email to one of us, and we'll do our best to include it. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to Deanna.
Thank you, Sally. And thank you all for the comments in the chat and coming off mute to add to the conversation. I know it's definitely getting me very excited about our next round of interviews and hearing what's changed and how things are going. Definitely feels like there's a lot of stories. I did hear getting locked in a freezer too. So, you know, sorry, my mind went a little sideways when I heard that one. Thanks, Amber. But we're going to jump into the retail food program standards next and what kind of trends we are seeing there amongst retail programs. So here on the first slide, we just started with, are you enrolled in the standards? And 70% of you are. But we did have a handful that are like, no, we are not. And then several of the other responses included, we used to be, but we no longer are, or we let, our activity lapse and we haven't done any assessments in the past X number of years. But yeah, so for the most part, the majority of you are enrolled in the standards, even if you are not being super active at the time. And the graph you see there on the right of the slide, we did not verify any of this information. This was all self-reported. But as you can see, we have standard 7 is the one that most folks report meeting, with a close second of standard 1, 5, and 3, all tied there very close for second place. But we also had 30 responses of none that we did not capture here on this graph. And then the next follow-up question is, well, if you meet those standards, well, which ones are you currently working on? We have standard 2 as the one that folks reported working on the most often. And we talked a little bit earlier about, what's required in that training plan, and the conversation kind of morphed into hiring and that new hiring practices. So standard 2 is definitely getting a lot of attention right now, with 30% of you that are working on the standards reported that was number 1. We also have a lot of activity going on with program assessment, standard 5, standard 9, and then also uniform inspection program there with then 1 and 3 following close behind. So we overlaid those last 2 that we were talking about with which standards do you currently meet versus which ones are you currently working on. And I found that to me, it was interesting that the ones that are very straightforward to meet, that you can either meet in statute or through a procedure, standards 1, 3, and 5, you just see some similarities there that, those are comparatively very often met, but they are not seeing a whole lot of traction into what they're working on. So that was interesting to me. And then, of course, here you have standard 7. Lots of folks meet that one, but you don't have a whole lot of work ongoing with that one as well. So we know that the ones that have to do with people are much harder to meet, or the ones that are very data intensive or analysis intensive, like program assessment and standard 9. still very difficult. So while you have some traction going on there, you don't really have a whole lot of folks meeting those standards. We've talked a bit about barriers with some of the other points in our survey, but the top 3 barriers we had with conforming to the retail standards, I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone. Number 1 is you don't have enough people, you don't have enough time, you don't have enough budget. So that overwhelmingly was our response. When it comes to resources, you have a lot of turnover. The people that understood the standards are no longer there. You don't have that legacy knowledge continuing on when you have staff retire, or you may not have enough staff. You have those holes that you're having trouble filling on your in your team. And then there's always a lot of competing priorities and lack of funding. So no surprise really that was number 1. But then second answer here was standards that are more achievable. So I found that pretty interesting too. I know we saw a lot of issues at CFP this year that had to deal with modifications to the retail program standards in one way or another. So those really line up well. Does anyone on the call have anything that they would like to add into the conversation about the retail program standards, and either things that you're finding difficult to achieve or things that have surprised you from this? We also heard that there was not a lot of incentive to work on the standards, and then continuity of that momentum also impacted. I know I was totally derailed by locking people in the freezer, but I was still hoping that the standards would get a few wheels turning in your heads. So if talking about the retail program standards is not impactful or beneficial or meaningful to your programs, also please let us know that as we do look at the questions that we're going to be asking and the dialogue that we're going to be having coming up in the fall with our 3rd round of these retail surveys. If we're going to take our time and compile all this data, we want to make sure that what we're seeing is something that you can use or is impactful or meaningful to your program in some way. So hopefully what you've seen here on these slides can help you with that. Yes, Kim. Kim put her hand back down.
Kim, me?
Sure. I saw Kim Carlton, Kim, other Kim.
Okay. Sorry.
Hey, there's a few of us now. So for the second one, the standards that are more achievable, I was just curious. I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So are they saying that they wish the standards were more achievable, or they found other standards that were more achievable, so that was a barrier to them achieving the retail program standards?
So the way that this was answered is the respondent said the barrier to why I cannot meet the standards is they're not achievable enough. They wish they had standards that were more achievable for a retail program.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so I see a few comments coming in here in the chat. Liz is saying that the standards is helpful in context of where other folks are, and there is a lot to be done. Yes, there is a lot regarding the standards that folks can spend their time on to measure their programs. And Kim Stryker, the reductions in funding are going to greatly reduce programs' ability. And yeah, I can see, it could be a concern. The standards may become a check the box exercise rather than actually using it for the intent to develop a quality program. Thumbs up with that one and some agreement. So thank you for those comments. I appreciate the input. So we will, with that, continue on. We have a couple more slides for you today. And in the interest of time, we will turn it back over to Carrie to talk about some of the emerging issues and legislative challenges that y'all are seeing.
Yeah, thanks,
you.
Deanna. So as Deanna said, we're going to wrap up with a couple of open-ended questions that we then worked to categorize. So next slide, please. And shout out and kudos to Sally Flowers for putting together this cool bubble map. So first question was, emerging issues impacting your state retail food programs. And we're seeing some top issues being kind of home-based operators, food freedom, staffing time and resources, political climate, but also then novel or specialized processes, new technologies, et cetera. So, these are, so one of the kind of the feedback that we're interested in are these are these categories still resonant? Do they resonate still with you? Are these still emerging issues? And also, again, we were talking about making the 2025 survey, continuous improvement, making it a little more streamlined. And Deanna, I'm sure we'll finish up with this, but we're looking for some input on some of these open-ended questions about, so for example, staffing time and resources. If we had these questions as predefined categories, we could maybe go a little bit more in depth into, so 2 years ago, I can imagine an agency saying staffing time, resources in 2023, and then again in 2025, but the context might be completely different. And we think it might be useful to get more into that context. So just again, some of the things that we're thinking about. And next slide, please. So the last question we asked you all was on legislative proposals impacting state retail food programs. Not surprisingly, a lot of those emerging issues we're seeing move their way into legislative proposals. We already with the food freedom and cottage food, hemp and cannabinoids, deregulation. We already heard from a lot of you just on this call that particularly with the kind of the deregulation push, that's really impacting how you move forward in implementing newer food codes. Just wondering as we wrap up here, where you all sit now, as Steve said, that a lot of the state legislative sessions are wrapping up. Anything new or different or particularly problematic from the current legislative session that you might want to come off mute and speak to? Just give you all a chance to share some of your experiences as we move into the summer and hopefully wrap up those sessions. Or any wins, maybe not some issues, but maybe you got some wins in your legislative session. Yeah, Kim Carlton, go ahead.
We don't get a lot of wins, so I thought I would share a win that we had in our legislative session, which was we got both chambers of our legislature to agree to our budget proposal, which is a licensing modernization, complete overhaul of the structure of our licensing, which hasn't been updated since the early 1970s, and also modernizes our fees for the first time in almost 20 years. So this will allow us to respond more flexibly and proactively to the industry, as well as provide us the resources that we need to keep our program going and growing. So we're very excited.
That is great news. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Kim. Yeah, Troy, please go ahead.
Yeah, we were able to, every 3 years by statute, we have a what's called referred to as a triennial review stakeholder process that initiates legislative into statute changes. And we were through that triennial review process able to demonstrate the budget shortfalls that we had for the program based off of licensing fees. And we've got a passed, it's still waiting for signature from the governor's office, but all indications, I mean, there shouldn't be any problem with that, but it will be a compounded 65% increase in our licensing fees starting with next year over the next 3 years. So it ends up being close to an 80% increase in license fees here in Colorado that our industry lobbied for us and strongly encouraged the legislature to pass that for our state, for the program.
Wow, that's excellent news. Thanks for sharing, Troy.
Yep.
All right. Unless there are other stories, I can hand it back over to Deanna.
All right, I was just checking there in the chat to see if we had anything else, and looks like our industry partners are helping us get things done. Kim Carlton says industry lobbied for them too, related to fees. So yeah, what a win when our partners are willing to go to bat for us. I think that is fantastic. Steve.
Just wanted to remind everyone, as we work on finalizing the program manager agenda for the in-person meeting at the end of June, if there are topics you'd like to make sure get included, please email those to Deanna and I, and we're working on finalizing that agenda. I am pleased to tell you, it appears that Lori Farmer, who heads the retail food program for FDA, will be able to come in person. Very exciting. I literally just got the news while we were on this call that it has been moved to HHS and will likely, and they have not seen anything that went to HHS that had been approved at the FDA level not get approved. So they're pretty excited that that will happen. We are, definitely looking forward to that. And I know you all appreciate the opportunity to visit with Lori and provide feedback to her. But that's one bit of good news we just received. But if there are topics you want to make sure get included, now is the time to tell us that.
Thank you for that reminder, Steve. Yes, anything that you want to talk about, please let us know. That goes for the retail program manager meeting at the AEC, as well as these calls. So, and also for the retail survey that is coming up later on this fall. If there's topics that are of interest to you or could be useful for you and your colleagues that you did not see here on these slides, or you don't recall talking about with me the last time that we went through this, please let me know what those are too, because I mean, we're going to bring together quite a few folks to make sure we are asking the best questions that are meaningful and also to make efficient use of your time, but we may overlook something. So I would really love to hear from you. So please email me any of those thoughts or questions. If you want to see those infographics that we were showing here on the screen, that will be a poster out at the AEC available for you to look at, and they will soon to be posted on our website as well. So you will have the old set and the new set there available to you. So does anyone else have any other questions regarding topics that you heard today, or something that you want to know more about, or something that one of your colleagues said that you'd like to hear more about? Let us know. We would love to connect those dots and hear from you. All right, and we have a few save the dates coming up. In September, we have our next call, so we've got plenty of time to plan for this one. And then December the 9th is going to be our 4th call of the year. If you want to go ahead and put those bookmarks on your calendar, the evaluation will be following soon to tell us how we did today. And I want to thank you all for your participation. It was great to hear you speak up on the calls and see all the great work that's going on in the chats and all of the wins that you've had in food code adoption and getting your partners in your corner. So with that, I want to give you a few minutes back in your day and say thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Deanna.